You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 574, where we're finally getting to talk about Temptation of the Force. As you guys know, we had planned to do this show a number of months ago. Then the Acolyte came out. We were hit with summer. A couple of different other things got in the way, and we just haven't been able to come back and talk about this. Although Lauren did do a breakdown of this already. This is going to be almost a chapter by chapter kind of thing with just a high level bullets of everything. But we really wanted to sit down and talk about this book because so much is in here, and so much of what I think is going to set up the rest of Phase 3 is birthed in this book, and no pun intended there because you never know. But joining with me tonight is Lauren. Lauren, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk about Temptation of the Force, but I was also enjoying discussing our Halloween decorations just a second ago, too, before we came on the show.
Yeah.
So now I'm kind of having to switch gears. I'm not going to lie, but
Yeah.
I am excited to talk about it. Yeah.
You're coming to us live from Endor, from what I understand as well.
Oh, yeah. I've got my little Ewok jacket. You don't really get the full effect on the video, but
no. It does look cool. And we figured out the hood is Wicket's hood as well. So it's got the stitching on top.
Yes, I will demonstrate.
I told her to wear it the whole show. And
I will not wear
not.
it the whole show, but I will demonstrate briefly.
Very cool. Before we get started, I want to say a special thank you to all of our Patreon members, especially our now part of the tribe members, Alex, Raphael, Danny, Mike Borda, Lauren, thank you so much. Dante, Riss Bayless, Justin, Jackson, Sharkman Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh C, Jacob, and Reader Reborn. If you guys are interested in Patreon, head out to cantinacast.com/Patreon. And to our astute Delusions of Grandeur members as well. This is Rod Racing, CJ, Steve, Daz. Thank you guys so much for all of your patronage. Prices start as little as $2, and we have years and years and years of back catalog shows that no one's heard unless you're a Patreon member, or seen unless you're a Patreon member. So head out to that. Also, thank you to guys for joining us for this live recording tonight on YouTube. You can head out to cantinacast.com/YouTube or youtube.com/cantinacast. Please like and subscribe, and click the little bell there. That way you guys know when we go live, and you can join us in the live recordings. If as we're going through the book, if you guys have questions, feel free to throw them out. We'd love to make this as interactive as possible. If I skip over the questions or I don't come to it immediately, it might be because I'm waiting or we're just running out of time. So don't take it personal there. So in the live chat with us already, Skywalker's Academy. Hey, what's going on? Music Train says hello there. And Christopher Gray is with us as always. Says, may the Force be with you, Cantina Cast. Thank you all for being such a positive YouTube channel with the Star Wars community. I'm so tired of all the negative Star Wars channels. Man, amen, brother. I'm so tired of them too. You would not believe how tired I get. A couple of things as far as and Lauren will keep track of all this, and we'll give you some shout outs at the very end as well. Let's see, what do we got coming up here? So Thursday, Jonesy and I are going to break down issue number 50 of Star Wars. So this wraps up Charles Soule's long-running series now of Star Wars, the main flagship title. And that one is so cool because he brings in so many different aspects of all of the work that he's done over the years, whether it's Star Wars in the past, Star Wars in the present, during the Rebellion era, or Star Wars in the future. Some of the stuff that he wrote after with Kylo Ren and Luke Skywalker. He does a great job bringing that. It's 50 pages long, so it's a pretty big issue. So we're going to spend some time dissecting that. There's some callbacks to stuff in the High Republic. There's callbacks to, again, a lot of the work that he's already done, but that should be a lot of fun to kind of break down. And then this weekend, I may have to shift. It may not be on Sunday, but we're going to try to do a way station because there's some news that we need to get caught up with Fred and Ed on. And then also we are going to be introducing something called A New Hope, the TV series. So I'll just briefly tee this up because it's a super high concept, and I want to give credit where credit's due. This actually came from Ryan C. Showers. There's a show I do. I edit a show called Scream with Ryan C. Showers, which is about Scream, the movies. he had this really neat concept that I completely stole. And he's taken each of the movies and he's broken them down into what he considers would be TV episodes. So we're going to do the same thing starting with A New Hope. We're going to break that down into, I don't know, however many episodes it turns out to be. We're going to rate it, and we'll talk about why we decided to cut the episode for, that particular episode at a certain time versus why did we carry on. It's a really neat thing. This will be a Patreon exclusive. If it's successful, we'll do the rest of the movie starting with Empire Strikes Back afterwards. If it's not successful, you'll never hear about it again. So join us. I'm kidding. Join us for that. And then Lauren and I will be back on the 17th. That's going to be a Tuesday night show. Excuse me. September 17th, we'll be back to do our part 2 of Temptation of the Force. So tonight we're going to go from about chapters 1 through 37, and then we'll come back and finish everything after that. So that'll be part 2 again, November 17th. That's going to be a Tuesday. It's a little bit different. And then after that, we still have like Ahsoka 1 year later. We've got to do that. And then Lauren will be back on the 22nd of September, and we'll be breaking down the High Republic comic issues 8 through 10. We'll finally wrap that series up until we go into 2025 with the rest of Phase 3. Okay, so a lot of stuff still coming. What's that?
I said, oh my goodness.
I know. I'm like, I can't even keep this all in my head. That's why I'm reading right off the notes here. All right, let's break it. Let's jump into this. Let's get into kind of our discussion, our breakdown of Temptation of the Force. And what are your initial thoughts? I know you've had a chance to already do the YouTube video. It's great. If you've not seen it, go out there and take a look at Lauren's video on that. I know you did the sneak peek, and then you kind of did your teaser and then your breakdown. But what were your initial thoughts reading this book? How did it fare against some of the other books that are in the High Republic, even in Phase 3 here? And just what did you think about it overall? Especially, I want to know your thoughts on Tessa Gratton's writing.
Yeah, well, what I appreciated is this definitely felt like just a straight up continuation of Eye of Darkness, which is the adult novel that came before it. So I feel like that was very seamless, and that it felt like just the natural continuation of the story that George Mann began.
Yeah.
So that was great. I really appreciated that, because I know sometimes with High Republic, it can feel like we're jumping around a lot. So I liked it that this just felt like a very smooth transition.
Mm-hmm.
And Tessa Gratton's writing, I really enjoyed, and I really felt like, especially the second half of this book, was a real page turner.
Yes.
And I was like, what is going on? What is going to happen? So that really had me going. Now, I will say, I feel like Tessa Gratton almost did too good of a job with making it feel bleak at the beginning, because I was like, I'm so tired of this. But once we started making progress, it really got to be good. So overall, I really enjoyed the book as a whole.
Yeah, I did too. I really, really enjoyed this book. I was so excited to read it. I was excited to reread it. I was excited to talk about it once the embargo lifted on it. I thought Tessa Gratton hit it out of the park with this one. She's got a style of writing that's similar for me to, and I say this is a huge compliment to Cavan Scott's writing, because it just felt like when I'm reading both of their works, it just moves. And I would agree. Like the first half of this book, it's not boring, but it is bleak. It's kind of painting, it's setting everything up, similar to almost to The Rising Storm in that same sense. And then you get to that. We're going to get up to chapter 37, which is just right after the Battle of Naboo, which was very exciting. But once we get to the Battle of Naboo, I mean, it just goes. I mean, there's a slight pause right afterwards, but we're right back into the thick of things. And the way this book ends, and which we'll cover, on the 17th later in part 2, the way this book ends is just kind of like a, mic drop, nail biter of like, oh my God, what is about to happen now? So I'm excited to know what happens after this book. But I want to say that, this is the book that I've been waiting for since, Light of the Jedi, really, because it was teased back then that there was something going on with Avar Kriss and Elzar Mann, and it'll include Stella and Geos in there, right? But we knew there was something there, and it just was. It's been teased and teased. It's been brewing, and finally, this was the big payoff. And rightfully, this book was called Temptation of the Force. We'll talk about that probably in our next video. But yeah, it was finally nice to get, take the cap off and let these two finally just kiss, and and then we have to deal with all of that. And that last chapter, I think it's chapter 30. What was it? 34
30
or 32? Hold on,
I thought
let me
it
see.
was 36. 36.
Yes, it's chapter 36.
Okay.
That one is deep. Like, I feel like we're going to spend a lot more time. We'll probably spend at least 15 minutes on chapter 36 alone, because there are some very, very interesting things that are said. And it really changes, at least for me, that chapter in this book has really changed my perspective on attachments and whether or not Jedi can successfully have love. And I cannot help but think about how much of what was being said, not in the romantic sense, but how much was being said about love that Luke was going through and what Luke was feeling when he was later on trying to wrestle with all of this and, you know, feeling the love for his father. A lot of what we hear Avar Kriss say can be translated into just love. Again, platonic, emotional, romantic, whatever you want to say, but it is pure in its love, in its purest sense, love, and how Jedi should perceive all that. And I think that's what really kind of helped Luke down the road. So more on that when we get to chapter 36, but really did a great job of finally giving us a lot of insight into what their mindset is and how these two at least are perceiving love. It's going to be very interesting later on, though, when we finally get to the end of Phase 3 or the end of the High Republic, and we move into the prequel era, and what changed. Like, why are they so adverse to this, right? Because I don't know if this is going to have a happy ending or not. I just don't know.
Well, yeah, this is my thing about chapter 36. I feel like I'm way more pessimistic about it than you are, because I'm like, something's going to happen. The other shoe's going to drop. It's not, there's no way that this is going to be like, oh, yeah, and it all worked out in the end. It turned out they were right this whole time. I don't know. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it, so we'll see.
And I'm with you. Like, I do feel like this is, like, everything I'm, not, no pun intended, but on paper, it looks great. You know what I mean? Like, you look at it and you're like, oh, yeah, this makes absolute 100% sense. But the key, what I think is probably going to change, and not to spoil it out, well, let's just save it, because I do have some thoughts as to, like, everything looks right. Everything she says is right. But here's probably what's going to happen that's going to make all of that change. Because I think it's in chapter 36 as well with what Elzar Mann is saying. Look, we're already talking about chapter 36. I know we're going to spend a lot of time there, but let's get into...
We'll save it, yeah.
Let's get into the rest of the book.
Turns out this whole show is about chapter 36.
It's just about Elzar Mann and Avar Kriss. But yeah, there are 35 other chapters. So let's talk about those. All right, so... the book, it opens up with kind of everybody kind of reconnecting and recharging, right? We've got Avar Kriss and Elzar Mann. They call each other. I mean, there's a brief, let me talk about the prologue. The prologue was pretty shocking itself, right? Because I left Eye of Darkness thinking, that's it. Porter Engel's probably got a maybe 1-2% chance of living, but it felt like that was kind of the finality for him. Come to find out, it wasn't, and it just continues on through the rest of this book as well. He's found out floating in space. He's rescued, and at first he's not sure where he's at, and then it turns out that he had been rescued by, was it Kar Santeca, right? So I guess how are you feeling, I guess, finding out that one, he lived, and kind of, let's just kind of talk about maybe Porter Engel, since he's the first one up here. How did you feel he's I guess, how would you summarize what his intent is and what he's really after out throughout the rest of this book here? Well,
I mean, so the thing that kind of caught me off guard with this, so I was hopeful that Porter would be alive, and I was glad that he was. So I kind of felt like we would have seen him die if he died. I just felt like with Vice, it was just too much unfinished business. So I was glad that I was right in that. And what surprised me about this chapter, though, is that when Care rescues him and nurses him back to health and Porter regains consciousness and they're talking, Porter's like, don't tell anyone you saw me. I have business I need to take care of. I can't get involved in your people smuggling that you're doing out of the occlusion zone. And I was surprised by that, because Porter usually is like very much like he will do anything he can to preserve as much life as possible. But, I mean, the way that I interpreted all of that is he is so desperate to just be done with Vice that he's like, I have to put everything else on hold until this is handled. So I was surprised by the way that he behaved when he first woke up, but it still kind of made sense, too, once I really thought about it. Yeah,
and that doesn't stop there. Like you said, a little bit later, there's a scene where Jedi are fighting, and they're in the middle of the attack on Naboo, and he's so like, I'm not going to concern myself with all of that. And even afterwards, right after that battle, not to jump ahead, but even after the battle's over, when he's talking to Avar Kriss, he's helping everybody, he's making soup, doing the stuff he does, but he's like, I got to go. Like, I can't stick around. I'm not in this for your, your revolution kind of thing. I've got to go find somebody. And it is his white whale. Like, he is almost he seems pretty much in control of things. I'm not saying he's like become obsessed and crazed, but at the same time, it's like you said, he's just done with it. He's so tired of Vice and constantly getting away and slipping through his fingers, which she does again, time and time again in this book alone, that this is it. This is his mission, right? Other stuff is going to go on. The galaxy's going to go on. Things will be fine. Avar Kriss is in power. They'll figure all that out. They don't need me right now. Right now, my mission, the best way to serve this galaxy is to put an end to General Vice. And that plays out through the rest of this novel. So that is a little bit, you're right. It is a little bit, it feels a little bit more severe than where he was in previous books and previous phases of this as well.
Yeah, but still makes sense, even though it's a departure from his past behavior, but I still was able to make sense of it, which is good.
Yeah. So into chapter 1, we kind of get caught up with Elzar and Avar Kriss. And for Elzar, I mean, he's really struggling. Like, he is absolutely broken. This is like, he's kind of like, leading the charge in the bleakness of everything throughout this first half of the book until him and Avar finally reconnect and do what they do. But he's still reeling over the things that he did on Valo. He's still thinking about, of course, Chancey Yarrow and, slicing her in half. He's starting to feel a lot of regret for what happened to Stellan Gios. All this is weighing on his shoulders, and this is not new for Elzar Mann. Like, he's constantly been this Eeyore and Dark Horse and just carrying all this emotion, carrying all this stuff. And this is why he's so susceptible to touching the dark side, which he's done now twice. But, he keeps thinking to himself, that what if what he's done is just too much and that he'll never be able to fix anything, right? He just kind of keeps talking like this. And he's worried that the biggest worry for him is that he feels like he doesn't know himself enough, even with all the training that he's gotten, right? And trying to make peace with the dark side that he's touched with. And what's her name? Loreni. Jorla Loreni? I'm drawing blank on her name. The Jedi Master that helped.
Orla
Jareni. My God. Orla Jareni. Like,
you had the J in the wrong place,
yeah, I was
but you were pretty close. Yeah.
Thank you. Even with all of the training that he went through her, he still feels like he's a loose cannon. At any point, he could snap and he'll go right back to the dark side. And he's worried about what's going to happen next time. Sure, things have been fine so far, but what happens next?
Okay, I have a question for you. In this chapter, when this is all being introduced, or I guess reintroduced, because like you said, this have been going on for a while. He's telling Avar all of this, and she's like, it's okay. It's going to be fine. I don't know if I'm just interpreting her response differently, but I was kind of like, Avar, he's telling you that he has killed people and he will probably kill people again. Like, why is this not? I feel like he's saying, like, I need psychological help. And she's just like, you're good. You're fine. And this was kind of like where my concerns started.
I don't think you're wrong in that. And I think based on nothing in this chapter, but maybe some of the stuff that happens later on, particularly in chapter 36 and later even after that when we get into our second show, I think that from Avar's perspective, she is, and this is a good segue into Avar, because this is really what's going on in Elzar's mind. For Avar, she's done some time. She's done some things. She's been out in the Oculus Zone for over a year now. That's really changed her. She's realized that she does miss Elzar. She feels like she needs to reconnect with him. And she seems to be okay, of course, with going way further than they have ever talked about doing or have probably ever done, unless you don't count the years when they were adolescents, which they've kind of alluded to in past books. And I think from her perspective, she's just thinking, look, as long as we're together, everything's going to be fine. I mean, she says as much in chapter 36. So yes, Elzar is kind of like this cry for help. And look, I can't trust myself. This is really, I don't know what I'm doing here. The weight of the galaxy could be on my shoulders. I'm going to screw everything up. And she's like, no, don't worry about it. Like, I'm here with you. As long as we stay connected, as long as we're together and we're never separated like we were for the last year, things are going to be fine. And to some extent, Elzar kind of reciprocates that a little bit later when he's talking about this in chapter 36, right? They talk about the balance that they have between the two. She doesn't say as much in this chapter, but I think at least that's where she's coming from. It is foolhardy, and I think we can poke holes in a lot of the logic and a lot of what they said again in chapter 36. We're just gonna keep coming back to chapter 36. We can probably
That's where
poke
it's
holes.
headed anyway. So.
Yeah, we can probably poke holes on a lot, but I think that's kind of where she's coming from. I don't know. That was my interpretation of it, but you're right. She is a little bit kind of like, yeah, don't worry about it. We're good. Yeah, sure. You killed a lot of people, slice somebody in half, but we're fine. We
all
fine.
make mistakes sometimes.
We all make mistakes. Yeah. But and on that, there was a line in here where it talks about, she says, she made so many mistakes. She made so many mistakes, especially in the final months of Starlight Beacon's existence. She chased after anger under the guise of doing her job, spun too near revenge, and nearly gave to the dark side. And this is when she almost killed Lorna D in the comics. It says, after the Drengir, the discordance of the dark side had been so loud. So Avar simply wasn't there for the fall of Starlight, for all the people who died, civilian crew, Jedi, everyone. And in the aftermath, when she should have reached back to Elzar Mann, when he held out his hand in grief and love, she pushed him away and left Elzar, left the Republic, left herself. And this is kind of where she was before. This is like that whole year. She really just left and wanted to not be a part of anything, because I think she felt like, I'm similar to Elzar, like I'm the root cause of all of this, right? It's safer if I'm out there just in the trenches doing Jedi stuff and not trying to command anybody, or not trying to be the center of the galaxy, or center of the face of the Republic now, or the face of the Jedi, right? She's been feeling like that for so long. But now, and to kind of finish up a little bit later in this chapter, it says, surrendering to all of it made her stronger. Realizing and accepting that she was in love with him made her stronger. She was afraid if she told him that right now, that he'd be the one to run away, which happens in chapter 36. But yeah, I mean, they are definitely more than friends here, right? They feed on each other. There's a line in there where they're talking about later on where she says, if you go, I go, right? Because they don't ever want to be apart. But it's the beginning of a relationship that's probably not going to end well, I would imagine, down the road.
Yeah, if you go to the dark side, then I go to the dark side.
Yeah, well, there's that too.
Yeah.
That's not my theory, though. I have a different theory of what's going to happen. But all right, chapter 2, we're reintroduced to Marchion Ro. Really creepy stuff here. He's got Marta floating around as a dead body now, right? Or as a embodied, like a ghost. And she appears several times throughout this book. And we saw this with his father. And I remember when it happened, I think it was it Starlight or Follow, or what book was that now? I forget when we first met, when we first finally saw his father show up. And I really wasn't sure what was going on. But anyways,
was this the Fallen Star? I
think it was Fallen Star. Yeah, I think it was when he was on the Gaze Electric and he was sitting on the throne or something like that. But this is part of their race, right? They have this curse where their dead ancestors just show up as ghosts, which is super creepy to think about, which honestly explains a lot with Marchion Ro. I mean, this guy is completely, if he's being visited by ghosts, the guy's probably not all there. He is kind of crazy, and we've seen that so many times. But anyways, he's there, and I'm trying to remember the name of the planet there where it's on Norrisin, right? This planet called Norrisin, where he's now creating these synthetic kyber crystals. And he's creating these kyber crystals because he wants these to be the backup array to power the Stormwall. So he's been growing them this entire time. And he gets word that on this planet that suddenly all of the workers are gone, and he's not really sure. So he heads down there. He ends up finding out that there is now this blight, and we're going to talk probably a lot about the blight here in a little bit, but this blight has been eating everything, and it's even eating the crystals themselves. Like, it's slowly eating the crystals, but it's eating these kyber crystals. It's eaten a lot of the people, a lot of the workers that he had there. And you think, if you want to know, if you're not sure what the blight is, the Nameless have the ability to calcify living organisms, and it's been pretty much limited to just living organisms. The blight can calcify just about anything. I mean, a whole land of, whether it's living or dying. It talked about it at some point, even like plastics and steel and all that would take longer, but it would just consume. It turns everything into dust. And so this is a big revelation. And the fact that we're getting this with like the second to last adult novel, kind of, I'm like, how are they going to wrap this up now? Because we've only got one more major book to explain the blight, but I think there's probably a good explanation for it. But I do want to talk about a part that I know triggered you, because I think when you read it, you texted me and were like, "Oh my God, I can't believe they just did this."
I talked about it in my video too.
Did you? Okay, well, I'll let you have the
Yeah.
floor on this one, but why don't you explain it, and you can kind of explain what it was that triggered. And I want to know, months later now, does it still bother you, or how do you feel about it?
Yeah,
Has anything changed?
when I reread this chapter to prepare for this show, I still felt the same way. I was like, wow, I still can't believe that was in here. So basically what happens, chapter 2, so this was really the main thing about this book that I really wasn't a huge fan of, is there's 2 instances in this book where animal cruelty happens on the page.
Yeah.
Which to me feels like a little bit much for Star Wars. I mean, I usually, I'm very sensitive to violence portrayals in media. And usually in Star Wars, I can anticipate that it's going to be pretty safe. There's not going to be anything too crazy. If there's anything severe, it's going to be absolutely necessary. Like, Anakin and the younglings, like that type of thing. So I wasn't a huge fan I felt like in this chapter, what happens is that Markion, he's doing tests on what exactly the blight does. He's trying to figure out how it works. He throws a person into there, which I felt like that was enough. That was pretty much like, okay, we know now what it does because it ate up the person.
Like he punched the dude and then threw him over the skiff and let the blight eat him.
Yeah. So question answered about how the blight affects living beings. But then he takes it a step further and he throws a cat in there.
A Tuca cat with only 3 legs, people.
And so it was just like, I read that. I was like, why was that? It's not necessary. We know how the question of how the blight works was already answered. We already know that Markion Ro is evil. He's killed tons and tons of people already. We don't need more affirmation that he's evil. So it just felt like overkill to me. So I was kind of like, not a huge fan. But the good thing about it is if you just skip over chapter 2, it really doesn't change your understanding of the book. So if you don't want to read about a cat having a miserable death, you can just skip chapter 2 and you really won't miss any information because all the information we got from chapter 2 is recapped later on.
Yeah. And I think some of this, and I'm not excusing it because it is kind of severe for even Star Wars, but I think some of this is, he's bored, right? He's absolutely bored with what's going on, and he's a psycho, and it's like, some psychopath pulling the wings off of, an insect or something, just torturing animals. That's essentially what he's doing here. So it is a little bit darker for Star Wars. I don't disagree with that. And then, like you said, later on, he is going to do some other things. But the takeaway from that, I guess, is he's starting to experiment. He's fascinated by the blight, and he loves the fact that it eats anything alive or dead or non-living. And so he's starting to experiment, and the experiments get a little bit even more, I guess, intense. There's more and more things that he just throws over to, and this is all for a reason, which kind of culminates in the final, literally the final pages and final words of the book. So let's move into chapter 3 and 4, and this goes back to Avar Kriss, where she's finally getting back to work. She's been traveling in and out of the the occlusion zone, and she's been rescuing people. There are only 2 people that can get through the zone right now, or the storm wall right now, and that's her and Vernestra Rowe. And there is some now confirmed. I think this is one of the things that we were debating. I don't remember when we were talking about in Eye of the Darkness, whether or not there was some kind of force factor in the ability for Avar Kriss to have made it through the storm wall the very first time. It does sound like that is the case. Vern and her are still the only 2 people that can do it. And there is something about connecting with the force and the power that they're able to have over the force, or with the force, however you want to look at it, that allows them to go back and forth through this storm wall. So to recap, if anybody doesn't know, Markion Ro has created this storm wall, essentially a fortified globe of force that people can't get through. If you try to go through it through hyperspace, you blow up, whether you're coming or going out of it. And the only way to do that, the only way to get through it safely, is you have to have certain coordinates that only he knows plugged into a specific drive that he has possession of, a path drive. And then and only then can you get through it. Yet, the R2 Jedi are able to do it as well. So she's been going back and forth, and they're going through the series of going in, rescuing people, and coming out. And she feels like this is really good work. I mean, she is at the ground level doing selfless acts of saving lots of children. Like I think she talked about there were a number of children that they've saved, but they're basically pulling people in, like with these refugees. They'd go into the zone through the storm wall, grab a bunch of people, come back out. And the funny thing is about all of this, and I'm sure you chuckled a couple times, there was at least 2 mentions of Maz Kanata as being like one of the pivotal people that is helping to coordinate.
Don't forget about Maz Kanata. That's what I kept thinking when it when it would be said.
She's like part of the the rescue alliance, right? She's pivotal. She's kind of that pivot person, and sending them on missions and stuff. She doesn't really show up in the book, but they do make mention of how important she is and how vital she is to this work. She gets the
name drop.
Yeah, twice.
More importantly than Maz Kanata, though, we do have Belen, who is also a pretty key person from Eye of Darkness, the adorable Ugnaught that Avar made friends with, even though he was very grumpy at first. I love him, so I was really glad that he was in this book as one of the key people that's helping connect people with the group that's getting them out. So that was cool.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of where the end of this chapter, she meets up with Rill, who doesn't really, Rill is back as well. She's a reporter, right? And both Rill, Belen, and Carr, they're out there as freedom fighters as well. They're like helping to coordinate and move people back and forth. And in one of these missions, when she goes across the storm wall, she ends up rescuing Belen and Rill, and they tell her, look, we need a favor from you. And to kind of jump to it a little bit later, the favor is they want her to record a message that they want to broadcast to everybody that's stuck in the inclusion zone, so they kind of give everybody hope. Because who else would you get other than Avar Kriss, right? The light of the Jedi herself, somebody that could really help rally internal fighting and resistance and that sort of thing. But just to provide a message of hope is what they want her to do. And so they meet up. They also meet. I think this is where they also meet. We find out that Kara Teka is the husband of Xylan Graf. If you didn't know that already, they kind of confirm it here, and they become central to this story as well, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit. Okay, let's move into chapter 5. This is on Owen, or Oane. I'm not sure how that's pronounced.
Oan.
Oan, maybe.
We can try all those. We can just go back and forth. That's fine.
But we've got Burry and Bell, so we're finally getting caught up with them at this point. And the real big takeaway is they're on a planet right now where there are these beings that are they have like this symbiotic relationship with trees. I think they call them like, what was it called? A nativity tree.
Yes.
And they use these trees to give birth to their children, and then they cross-pollinate the trees. Anyways, the point is they're called there because they are they're called because they're trying to get them out of there. They're on the very edge of the occlusion zone, and so Burry and Bell have been tasked with going to all these different planets that are around the border of the occlusion zone and trying to evacuate people because they're worried that Marchion Ro is going to expand the storm wall even further than he already has. Right? He's already done it once. There's nothing that wouldn't stop him from expanding and consuming more planets within the storm wall again. And so they're on this kind of it's just kind of a normal mission to go try to get people out of there. This is tough for them because they can't, right? They can't really leave the planet because they use these trees. And while all that's going on, they suddenly get a distress call from someone saying that they found the Drengir. And then so they're called immediately back to their ship, which is a Tractate. And the Drengir are suddenly reintroduced into the High Republic, which I thought was great. I want to kind of watch your thoughts on this. I missed the Drengir. I think you and I talked about it at one point. That felt like, we had the big climax in the comic book where Avar Kriss and the progenitor, and they kind of put that in force stasis. But then when that thing went down, right, they took the main Drengir, the progenitor itself, and they put it in that force stasis, and they stuck it on Starlight Beacon, and then Starlight Beacon crashed. That was one of the first things I thought. It was like, well, what the heck happened to that thing? Did it die? Did it live? And then suddenly the Drengir are back. I got pretty excited. It doesn't sound like we're going to get the Drengir back at all like we did before, but it was nice to kind of have them play a central role into kind of more thematically what's going on with the Blight itself. But your thoughts?
Yeah, that was kind of my thought, is that they're being reintroduced as sort of a way for us to learn more about the Blight, kind of like as a device for seeing how the Blight affects other Force beings. because it's later told to us that the Drengir can sense it coming, which we'll get to that later. But so I do think that they were introduced for a specific purpose. I do like having the Drengir back better than I liked a whole new thing being introduced like the Blight was. But what I'm guessing is probably going to happen is, this is just me speculating, but I think that eventually we're going to learn that these three things, the Nameless, the Drengir, and the Blight, are all somehow interconnected or related to each other in some way. Like maybe like one is the foil for the other two. I don't know exactly how it's going to work, but I feel like these three have to be connected in some way because they have so much in common. Like the Drengir and the Nameless have so much in common, and then the Nameless and the Blight have so much in common.
Yep.
So that's kind of my thought. But I mean, I was fine with the Drengir coming back, especially for the purpose of us learning more about the Blight. And it does make sense about the head. What is the name? What is the word for it? The progenitor?
The progenitor.
The progenitor. Yeah. Thank you. Of the Drengir, like surviving, because one quote from this book later on is that just because something's on the bottom of the Iram Sea doesn't mean that it's dead, referring to Buryaga, who was stuck down there. So, I mean, it makes sense that it survived.
Yeah. I think you're right. One Up versus CPU just chimed in. Says, I think they're all from Planet X and were made by the Echo Stone. So I like that theory quite a bit. Also, while I'm in the chat, Noah Rogers says, good evening. Love the Clone Wars hoodie and the Nubs poster. Thank you for that. Alex says she can fix him, talking about Elzar Mann. Says, I mean, Kylo exploded his mom into space, and Rey was like, yeah, he's just misunderstood. So, yeah, that's pretty much what's going on here, I think, as well with these two characters.
Yeah, it's okay.
More on the Drengir here in just a little bit, because, you know, when I saw that the first read, I was like, oh my God, the Drengir are back. And they are, but they're not really. But we'll hold that thought. Yeah. The next few chapters there's not really a whole lot. Chapter 6, Elzar's on Coruscant. We learned that he's really dodging any chance he gets. He's dodging his responsibilities and duties. Like, I wondered how he would fit in, you know, kind of being, as that liaison to the Jedi and being in the midst of like public service. And I don't know, the government just didn't seem like Elzar, and you can see it here. He's like dodging and trying to get away from whatever he can. And he spends a lot of time worrying about the weight of everything being on his shoulders and the weight of the galaxy and how things are going. And he's just always stressed out. Avar does call him after she makes the jump through the storm wall. It's almost like she calls him every time just to let him know that, hey, I'm okay, right? Because it's pretty dangerous.
If she doesn't, he's going to lose it and he's going to freak out. That's what I think, anyway.
Well, that's where my theory goes a little bit later.
Yeah.
And chapter 7, we're on Rylus 2. We meet up with Kar Senteca, and he's basically setting up a message with, what's his name? I said Bevis here. I don't know why I was thinking Bevis. Bellin, right?
Bellin, okay, yeah.
Bellin and Rill and him, they set up Avar's message and its broadcast, so, you know, we got to see that happen. And then in the very next chapter, chapter 8, we're inside the the occlusion zone. And this is where Porter is still looking for Vice, and he sees and hears Avar's message, which inspires him. We'll get to that as far as what that means a little bit later. In chapter 9, we're on the Gaze Electric. And this is where Ro is doing more research with the Blight. He also learns that there's a part in there where Marta, I want your thoughts on whether or not this was real or not, because there's two things in here that really made me think, like, man, is she really here? Like, I know we said she's a ghost, right? But she's walking around and she's got these like flowers and these petals, and she's tossing them. And every time she tosses them, they're Blight infected, and so it's spreading from there. On top of that, there's a moment later on when the Nameless are there, and she's petting them, and the Nameless are like kind of like nestling their head into her hand, like she's actually there. It's like, I don't know, like almost like a force ghost of sorts. So I do wonder if they are kind of like some Evereni force ghost rather than just, you know, a figment of his imagination. It feels like there's something more material there than not.
Well, in the way that I interpreted, that's interesting about the Nameless nuzzling into her hand. I think I missed that, but the fact that you just pointed that out, it does kind of change what I was about to say, because what I thought was when she's because when he's looking at her and it seems like there's ash around her and she's having some sort of influence on it, I was thinking, oh, I bet that maybe once upon a time she spread the blight too, and this is kind of like a clue of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I just interpreted it as some sort of vision of the past that he was having. But if the Nameless is interacting with her, then I don't know how you could explain that if she's not actually a ghost.
Yeah.
So that is pretty weird. Or maybe if it's the Nameless are just so like mentally connected with Markion since he has the Rod of Power, maybe that could explain. Maybe they're able to kind of see the vision as well, perhaps.
Yeah. Let's see. Skywalker's Academy says maybe it's a force projection. And One Up says, I think the Oculus is from WoW. And he is absolutely right.
Yeah, that explains it. Yeah.
So I can't get that out of my head. So
Too
I'll probably
much WoW.
I'll say it a few more times here tonight. I promise you. Chapter 10, we get caught up with Gira Staros. I think, I don't know if this is for the first time or not. I think it might be.
Mm-hmm.
And, she's more concerned that why Ro is suddenly gone. Right. She feels like Ro's kind of tapped out or just zoned out. He's not really part of what's going on.
He doesn't care about he doesn't care about the Nihil anymore, really. It doesn't seem like.
Nah, he's moved on. I mean, it's confirmed as much in all of this. I mean, he does have backup after backup plan. So he's, I think she says I think at one point Gira tells Lena like, yeah, he's got enough backup that he could probably take a couple days off if he really wanted to and not have to worry about anything. So that's part of it. He is bored, like we said before, but he just becomes so obsessed with the blight that he's starting to see like he wants to experiment because he's got bigger plans. And this is very typical of Markion Ro. What I have loved about his character is we've had so many things that have been introduced to us because of him, right? Things that he's introduced into the story. And right when one thing gets, figured out, or solved for, destroyed, he just goes to the next one. He's always got something else to throw at us. And the latest one, of course, now is the blight, the Nameless. Like we're getting to the point now, which I didn't think we'd ever get to, where the Nameless are almost figured out. Like I think we kind of understand how they work now. That'll probably be covered in the second video that we'll do, because it happens later on in the book. But he does have all kinds of contingency plans, and he's willing to throw away and drop all the other stuff because if it's no longer important, he'll do that. Now, I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but that is part of his character, and he's been very consistent about it. And the latest thing now is he doesn't care about the Shi'ars, right? That was his kind of like, what were they, his bodyguards or whatever it was?
Yeah.
He threw those guys away. The Children of the Storm, forget those guys. He was working, the Drengir, that was part of his plot at one point. The Nameless, of course, the Stormwall.
Does he even care about Bulin anymore? I don't think he does.
No, he makes a comment in here where he's just kind of like, that guy's kind of useless to me now, too.
And before, he was like, I gotta get this guy.
Oh, I know. Like, he was all about it. Even his main, maybe even his main people, like, we don't really talk about, you think about where we were in Light of the Jedi and the Rising Storm and how prominent, I already forgot the name of the people are, but like Lorna D and all the folks that he had that were kind of his right-hand people, right, his generals, if you will. They're not even really referenced or talked about at all in this book. So he's just moved on from one thing to the next.
I also wonder if Gira's, which, I mean, we do kind of get into in this chapter a little bit, if Gira's sort of governmentization of the Nihil kind of took some of the fun out of it for him. Now that she's tried to make things a little bit more regimented, and earlier in the book, he has to admit that he's like, right. He's like, actually, it is kind of working. He has to admit it to himself, even though he hates it. So I almost wonder if that also made him be like, it's boring now.
Yeah, I did chuckle when he said that he did admit that, okay, maybe some of this stuff is working better than what I had. And then we also get Nan reaching out to her. So Nan is another character we've been introduced to before. Nan reaches out and is like, hey, where's your daughter at? Avon. And, she tells her that Avon's left and she's doing, I don't remember what the thing was, but it was almost like a threat. Yeah, she's at school. Yeah. But it came across as a threat from Markion Ro saying, look, I'm looking for your daughter, which we know they have a very close relationship. I do wonder if that's going to sprout into something more and we'll get Gira come do another role reversal, come back to the light, if you will, or have a redemption story of some sort. But if it's going to happen, it's going to be through her, because of the love of her daughter, because I think that's pretty apparent. Even as horrible and as just, shallow as Gira Star Wars is at times, it does feel like there is a genuine love there for Avon.
Well, that's one thing I did really appreciate about this book is that I feel like Tessa Gratton does a really good job of making Gira's motivations very clear. When previously I'd been
I know.
complaining,
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
been like, I'm not buying it. I know that they've been kind of explained, but for me, it didn't fully explain the extent that she went to. But Tessa Gratton finally convinced me. So, and it
Yeah.
is because of Avon. It's because she has this desperation. She wants to give Avon everything. Even if Avon is like, no, like this is way too much. You've taken it way too far. I don't want this. Gira still like can't stop herself. She wants to give everything she can to Avon, no matter the cost.
Yeah. Let's see. One up says, I think the Evereni ghosts are different from what Vern sees. I think it's connected to the Force because they also have the telepathy and people who are about to die, like the point of view with Marta. It says, then everyone on the ship had telepathy when they got close to Planet X. Yeah. And then Marta,
Yeah.
Yarna, and Markion all around with rods, the Echo Stones, which amplify the Force powers too. Yeah, they need to do more with the stone. They need to bring more the rods into the adult novels, I think, more.
Yeah.
Because and since Path of Vengeance, we really haven't had a lot of them. But they were brought up in the comics very briefly, but we haven't had a lot of. And in fact, even in this book, they just talk about the rod, and you get the kind of the gist that it controls the Nameless, but there hasn't been a lot of research. I think this is what Reith is doing. Not to take anything away from the comic that's going on right now, but Reith Silas has really kind of been forefronting a lot of the knowledge and research on what the origins of the Nameless and Planet X, and I imagine he's going to cross into all of the rods and some of the origins there as well. Let's see. Chapter 11, we go to the sixth moon of Felna, and this is where Burry and Bell are trying to find out why the Drengir are back. They head to this rainforest. That's what this moon is, Felna 6 or whatever it is, and they find this Drengir, and this is our first. When they find the Drengir itself, it's feeling alone. It feels it's been cut off from its family. It's very scared. It didn't know why, and it was dying. And they don't kill it. They wait for this whole thing to die. A little bit later, after it dies, it's still kind of like kicking and screaming, and eventually it does. And I think they let Ember burn the thing when it's done. But this has really got Burryaga feeling like something's not right here. Like the Drengir were never like this, right? Not to mention that it never attacked them, but there was just something about it that felt lonely, and it's really bothered Burryaga a lot. In fact, he stopped. I think when Bell and Ember first saw it, they were going to just run at it and kill it. He stopped them from doing it because he could feel that this thing was already dying, and out of sympathy, he didn't want them to do that.
Yeah, he kind of felt sorry for it in a way just because of the suffering that it was going through. Because, even though the Drengir are monsters, and the Jedi have pretty much come to the conclusion at this point that even though they try not to kill, the Drengir you do pretty much have to kill. But in this particular case, Burryaga's like, this thing is already suffering. Let's just leave it alone. It's like, don't put it through anything else.
Yep. Chapter 12 was an interesting one because we're on Coruscant, and Elzar finally goes to the council, right? He's been living with the grief of killing Chancellor for so long. He finally heads to the council. They actually called him there, right? And he's thinking, wow, if they're calling me, this has got to be something important. I'm not sure what's going on. He gets there, and they basically offer him a seat on the council. And so he, at one point, I think he blurted out, I killed someone. Like, he literally blurted out.
And then Yoda's response is, killed have we all. It's like, I did not, right. This is not how I thought this conversation was going to go.
Yeah. But, he does. And then he goes on to tell him, he blames himself for the Storm Wall since Chancellor created it. He thinks if she was still alive, that, again, Stellan would be alive. He was horrified. And because they asked him, how did you feel? And he's like, they asked him, did you like it? And he's like, no, I didn't. I hated it. And he's like, and the Jedi are pretty much like, yeah, this is kind of normal. Like, you did something wrong, but, you dealt with it. You didn't cross over to the dark side. He tells them, I'm working on accepting my mistake because they're a part of all that makes me who I am. And they end up telling him, look, we want you on this council because we don't replace people, we just add people, right? You're not replacing Stellan Gios. We're adding Elzar Mann to the council. So this is completely, it completely catches him off guard. Not at all what he was expecting. he thought he was, I don't know what he was thinking. He was going to be tortured or kicked out or have to go to, the moon again and go, repent for his sins.
Well, see, here's my thing is I feel like the more that I almost called him Stellan, the more that Elzar goes to people and is like, hey, I messed up and I think I'm really in a bad way. And people are like, no, it's fine. I almost feel like Orla Jareni is the only person that, and Stellan, both people who are gone now, I
Mm,
almost feel like they're the only two people who heard what Elzar was saying and were like, okay, you need help and we will help you and we
mm,
will work with you on this. I feel like ever since then, every time he tries to tell somebody, like, I did something bad, I'm feeling tempted by the dark side, blah, blah, blah. It's like everybody's like, no, you're good. Like, it's fine. And so I just feel like this is like an
yeah.
accident waiting to happen because I feel like nobody is really hearing what he is saying.
Yep. No, I don't disagree at all. Like, it does feel like I wouldn't say he's gotten like a free pass at everything, but and there's something to be said about, okay, yes, we all make mistakes and that sort of thing, but no one's asking him, like, even in this, they don't really get into like, how have you been doing? What are you feeling right now? Are you struggling every day? Because the answer would have been, yeah, I'm struggling a lot. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
this is all I think about all day long. I have a lot of anxiety about this and I'm not functioning very well because of all of this, right? They don't get into all of that. They just said, yeah, you made some mistakes. We've all killed people. No big deal. Take some time and think about it. Let us know, right? Take the weekend, spend it and talk it over with your family. Let us know what you think, but we'd love to have you on the council.
Yeah. They just want, yeah. Instead of being like, okay, let's find out more about your mental state right now, they just want to know if he's going to be on the council or not.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I'm a little nervous about how that's going to turn out.
Yep. Well, we'll get to that here at some point, I'm sure. Nothing doesn't really get covered in this book. I mean, we know his ultimate fate, which we'll talk about. It happens later on in the book in terms of, his decision on the council. But we get into chapter 13 with Avar and Vern. Not a lot that goes on here. It is interesting that you've got training proteges with both of them. Emery Cantros we find out that he's been working undercover in the occlusion zone. We also know that Avar sold her diadem, her crown that she wore, the little diadem thing. She sold that for food at some point to feed some of the people that were behind the OZ, which I thought was really, really sweet of her. And then we get an update on Vern. She's cut her hair real short, which I think may have already happened in the other novels, but it's confirmed here. So not a whole lot there. They do intercept the Nihil ship at some point. The ship is surrendering, and they're fully expecting to go to war with the ship, and it turns out it's Zylan Graf. So he's jumped onto one of these Nihil ships. He's escaped. He's finally gotten away from there, and he's turned himself over. And what he's offering is like he knows how to destroy the Stormwall because he is one of two people that created the Stormwall. So Zylan Graf is finally introduced formally into the story.
Which is interesting because, I mean, and the reaction that the characters have, I think, is very similar to the reaction that I had, which is like, what does this guy want and what is he doing? Because with Zylan Graf, like, you can never really tell, which I do feel like eventually in this book, we do learn a little bit more about his motivations. But up until, like, just recently, I feel like you can never really tell what he wants or whose side he's on or what he's going to do. And that's one thing about him that's always driven me crazy. So when he shows up and is like, hey, I want to help y'all, everybody's like, why? Like, what is it that you're playing here?
He wants his dog, Plinka.
And his husband. Don't forget about it.
I think he wants Plinka more than his husband, honestly.
I think he wants both of them the same, but I think he doesn't want to admit that he wants his husband as much as he wants
that's
Plinka.
fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've got an interesting relationship.
Yeah.
Quick chapter in 14, we just learned that Porter, he basically raids a place that Vice has been at, and he kind of changes his tactic. Now this is where it did feel like he was kind of getting a little too personal. He's now thinking, okay, I'm going to learn everything I can about Vice because that's going to help me later try to, help me find her later down the road. And he's changing his tactic. He's never done this. He talked about in the past, he's always tried to search her from a higher level. And now he's going like, he really wants to understand his target in a deeper way. So,
and one thing, I mean, there's one line that's Porter would become the perfect hunter for only Vice, just the two of them. Everything else could fall away. I'm like, that I gotta
Pretty much
admit,
what
that doesn't really sound like the Jedi way, honestly.
No, not at all. But yeah.
Yeah.
Chapter 15, so this was the chapter where the other trigger was, because at one point, I think this is where Vice, so this is on Naboo now, which, by the way, Naboo just being graffitied and having like the temple itself had the Nihil storm on there, the Nihil symbol on there, and they had the flags up. Like I want to see what that visually looks like, because all I know, of course, is Naboo from the Phantom Menace. And to think that it's been vandalized by the Nihil in this way is kind of crazy to think about. Right? And to think there was a massive battle, which we're going to get into in just one second, on Naboo, which was kind of exciting. So it was nice to have this as kind of the location. On top of that, all the lovey-dovey stuff that happens with Elzar and Avar happens on Naboo, where, Luke and
Naboo
Padme
is the
would be.
place for love. Yeah.
I'm telling you, yeah. So.
Yeah, the graffiti made me a little sad. I don't want to see that. I think it would be depressing. How beautiful those buildings are, all that ugly Nihil graffiti on it.
Yep.
No. Mm-mm.
And if you played the Star Wars Battlefront 2, there's a couple of scenarios where you learn that Naboo had been in another battle a long time ago, and you get to learn more about their defense systems and stuff too. So it feels like it's just one of those cities, kind of like Tatooine, that is kind of pivotal to a lot of the big epic things that happen in Star Wars, which is always kind of fun.
That is also explained too. They do talk about how it is just because of its standing in the Republic, and also I think also something to do with where the planet is located. It is a strategic place.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of cool to have that explanation too.
Yep. And at this point, sorry, spoiler alert, but Vice has pretty much taken this as kind of her headquarters, right? She's deemed it as her headquarters at this point. There's the Gungans, when they came in and took over, stayed underwater. So if anybody's wondering, like, why didn't the Gungans put up a fight? Well, they didn't have that relationship. Like, right? It took Padme to kind of bring the Naboo and the Gungans together. They pretty much just stayed underwater and like, yeah, we don't care about those guys. Let Theed fall for all we care. And and
the Queen hightailed it out of there too. Padme would never.
That's like their
yeah.
That's
Padme
what they do.
never.
Whenever they're under attack, they just get the Queen out of here. Let's get her out of here. So they took her out. So
At least Padme put up a fight and was like, no, I got to go back and help my people.
Exactly. But Vice has got Kar Santeca, and she's basically holding him there as a prisoner because she wants to lure Porter Engle and Avar Kriss. She's well aware of the message that's been broadcast. She knows that he was kind of behind it. And at one point, this is where she cuts Plinka, like she cuts Plinka's neck, the dog. It's like a snow dog, 6-legged snow dog. It makes it bleed. Now, later on is explained, of course, Kar is like freaking out that, his dog has just been murdered in front of him. His throat's been sliced. And then we find out that Vice knows the anatomy of the dog, and that technically the big artery, whatever that you would expect to be on the throat, is not really there on a snow dog. So
I still think it's not okay to slit a dog's throat for any reason ever.
Yeah, right.
Call me crazy. Call me crazy. But that is how I feel. Yeah, I did not appreciate that either. Again, it just felt like overkill. So I don't know. I wasn't really a fan of that being included.
But she wants to know where Zylan Graf is at as well, right? She needs Zylan Graf because he's escaped. Chapter 16 is about Zylan Graf. And long story here. I mean, I don't know how we want to summarize this, but he stole that Nihil ship that they found found him on. He brought suitcases, which I thought was hilarious. Zylan Graf
He's gotta bring his stuff.
He's so over the top. Oh my God, he's so extra the entire book. But he has some great moments a little bit later.
Yeah.
Let's see what else. We learned that he built the storm wall, the storm seeds, and he churned gravity's light and the lightning crash. This is all kind of catch up for anybody that hadn't read some of the books that came before it, honestly. He tells him that he was given the path data. He has the path data. He knows how to render the wall irrelevant, and that all they need to do is take the home key, pop that in there, and they can bring the entire storm wall down and make it irrelevant forever. But he wants them to take him to Avon Sunville so they can and wants them in return. He'll do all this stuff, right? He'll help take down the storm wall so long as they kind of make Naboo one of the first places that gets liberated and freed once they have the opportunity. Which again we talked about was either because of his dog and or his husband. I don't know. You pick which one what the real motivation is.
When they ask him, he says, "My dog is there," but
yeah.
I got the feeling that it was because of both.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Okay, we go back to Bella and Buryaga. This time they're at another planet, so there's another report of a Drengir. We're just cutting this real short here. But there's farmers that are missing, and they find a Drengir hole, and they go down the hole, and it's all the telltale signs that the Drengir, definitely were on this planet, but they don't find anything in there. And then Buryaga starts to feel something strange. Later on, they end up finding that there was the blight on this planet as well. So now you've got two planets. That this blight, and it's starting to spread everywhere. It's not just a couple planets; it's starting to grow and grow across lots of planets. And there's something about the blight that is just really kind of pulling at him.
Well, and it's interesting too because I feel like this is kind of the first hint that we get that the Drengir almost seem like they can feel it when the blight is coming, and so they left before it got there. And the fact they also point this out too, that the fact that the Drengir left before they had eaten everything, that was another clue that the Drengir can sense that something isn't right, because this isn't how they typically behave. Usually they would destroy everything and then they would leave if they weren't killed first.
Yeah, I mean they hypothesize that it's likely the Drengir mind controlled people, got on a starship and then took off to another planet before the blight got there, or right after the blight arrived. So. And it's not I don't know what it is. It's an entity. It's like the Nothing from another famous movie. All right. We go to Naboo, back to Naboo, and Car Santeca is taking care of Plinka. He calls Balin and Rel to warn them that Vice knows who he is. Vice, captures him, and she tries to break him down and tortures him and that sort of thing. A lot of horrible stuff there. All right, chapter 19 is really sweet. This is where Elzar and Avar kind of having a moment here, and he gives her this new diadem that he had made. And earlier on, there was a scene where he kind of went into the shop and picked it up. You really weren't sure what he was picking up, but he gives her a new diadem. And there was, I think it was 3 stars on there, or 3 gems, right? And they were supposed to represent all 3 of them, Avar, Stellan, and Elzar on there as well. There was an interesting moment too where Elzar is like getting really frustrated. I'm sorry, he didn't give it to her. This is where he picks it up. But there is a moment, he gives it to her a little bit later, I think in chapter 36 or whatever it is. There is a moment in here where he's feeling, and I want your thoughts on this, because he talks about the people of Coruscant and how unaffected they are by everything that's going on in the galaxy. And the more I thought about it, the more it does make sense, right? These guys are so out of touch, right, on Coruscant with what's really happening out there. And to be fair, Marchion Ro has been very selective about where he attacks. He hasn't gone to Coruscant. Well, he does at the end of the book. But he hasn't gone to Coruscant. He hasn't attacked some of these. He's been kind of doing his own thing. And unless it impacts these people on Coruscant, they don't really care. That's very similar to, I guess, real-world politics in a way. But it's frustrating for him because he's out there saying, look, there are people dying. There are people that need us. And outside of what Lena So is doing in the RDC, the general populace, and especially like senators and other groups of people, are just kind of like, yeah, whatever. It's just another kind of terrorist attack, and it happens all the time, so it's no kind of big deal. But I don't know.
Well, and okay, I do gotta say, I almost feel like I gotta defend the people of Coruscant a little bit, because think about, like, I mean, all of this is going on so far away from them, which, it isn't an excuse to not care about stuff happening to real people that are, suffering. But also, like, I mean, think about, just if we're talking about like the lower levels of Coruscant, the people living down there have enough problems that they're just trying to deal with in their own daily lives. So there was a part of me that, while I get it why Elzar is frustrated that people maybe aren't talking about it or aren't being as aware of it as would probably be appropriate, I do also kind of feel for the people on the other side of that, being like, how am I supposed to be able to follow this whole thing that's going on, like, way over, like, very far away, when, like, I've got my own problems at home that I'm just trying to deal with, So I don't know. It kind of made me wonder if maybe Elzar might be a little bit out of touch with, like, what the lives of people are like outside of being a Jedi.
Yeah, and he's pretty close to it. I mean, he's in the trenches, so to speak, all day long. So I get where he's coming from. But yeah, I definitely can see that as well. So, all right, let's roll into at one point too. Also, they meet up with, like, what's his name, Kevin Tarr, which is another he's a character I really like. He didn't really have a whole lot to do in this book, but really cool to get caught up with him. Avon, everybody's heading to basically I forget which building was on Coruscant because they're about to break the storm wall, right? They're about to pop in the codes and kind of bring the whole thing down. In chapter 20, this is where Avar and Elzar they're holding hands at one point. They end up going to the Jedi meditation area. And this is where he gives her the new diadem. It's rose gold. It's got 3 gems on it. And, you know, Avar kind of has her own little confession here, right? She basically says that she tells him, I'm the reason why Stellan died, right? I gave up my position there. I gave up my role. She confesses that she ran away to ensure that no one else that she loved would get hurt, and why she's been gone for about the last year fighting in the occlusion zone. And then she kind of tells him, like, hey, you know, when this is, you need to go with me. Like, why don't you come with me? Like, together we're stronger, kind of thing. Elzar then says, hey, you're never going to believe this, but they offered me a position on the council. Now, when I read that the very first time, I thought, oh my God, she's going to flip out. Like, it felt like that was something that she was trying to get to, right? Or at least in my own head, I thought, wow, I don't know how this is going to go. Maybe she's going to be really upset. But she was she was very supportive, I thought. Like, I think she was a little like, man, I wish they would have offered it to me. But she loves him and she wanted him to be happy, right? So, you know, she took it pretty well.
And maybe she's grown too. Yeah,
I think so, for sure. And then he almost says, I love you at this point, which one of them will say it here just shortly. He stops himself. It's Elzar. He says, and that's about all he gets out. He puts a diadem on her head, and then they walk out holding hands, and they leave, kind of thing. So, nice little moment there. Let's see. Chapter 21, we're on Hosnian Prime. Yeah, hey, shout out to Hosnian Prime. Gira is trying to find out, like, where the heck Ro is at. You know, she's calling around, trying to figure him out. This is where we learned that the Shi'ar, you know, after Arathab died, if you guys remember him, he was in the comic book. After he died, Ro was like, screw those guys. I don't need them anymore. And then Vice calls her and tells her, like, hey, they're about to take down the lightning crash. And it's going to be attacked here very soon, which Vice has a very interesting perspective on the lightning crash and the storm wall. I love the fact that she, like, hates it. Like, she does not like she wants a fair fight. Like, she doesn't like all this sneaking around. She just wants a war to be a war, and, you know, no storm walls. Just, she could care less if that thing came down, which I thought was hilarious about that. But
yeah, I mean, maybe she feels like also maybe it's a little bit of arrogance on her part too, where maybe she feels like, well, if it comes down, like, I can still hold my own against the Republic. It won't be an issue.
No, I think that's part of it, and I think she just likes an old school fight. She's just born, or, you know, made differently, I guess, if you want to call it that. All right, chapter 22, we're back on Norrisan, and this is where Markian Ro is throwing things into the blight. Like, it said he took like 6 things, and I don't remember if we got all 6 of the things that he was throwing down there. It's whatever, just to see. But one of the things, though, I guess the more interesting thing that he threw down there was a leveler egg. Now, he's just tossing these leveler eggs down into the blight. There aren't many of these left, right? There's only a finite number of levelers that he has, and the eggs are pretty rare and scarce. But the interesting thing was when he threw it down there, the blight it kind of went up to the egg, and then it went around the egg, which I don't remember I don't think we really get a good explanation for that in the book, but I did find that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it does at least seem like the blight does not hurt the leveler. The leveler doesn't like it. But from what I got out of this, I think that the blight doesn't actually kill the leveler either.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's got to be something there.
Yeah, it is a little nebulous, a little gray still. He does use the force rod here, and he's got 2 levelers with him, and they're crying because he's forcing them, and I think they are scared of the blight, right? They don't want to go into it, and I think one of them is forced to go into it, and they both kind of stop before he does. We'll get to more of that here a little bit later in probably our second video. But all of this kind of gives him an idea, right? That he can turn the blight into a weapon of sorts, which is ultimately what he's going to do. All right, chapter 23, we get to Elzar. So this is it's now that the storm wall is going to come down. They've got a way to get through the path. The mission here is Elzar is going to take a team to Lightning Crash. They're going to take down Lightning Crash, which will take down the storm wall. While that's going on, Avar is going to go with some Jedi out to Naboo. They're going to track down Vice's main ship and capture Vice if possible. But basically, they're going to liberate Naboo at this point. So everybody takes off to go do what they're going to do. Now we're getting into the Battle of Naboo, which will go kind of quick because, I mean, there's a lot of great stuff on here, but it's a lot of action sequences, so we're not going to really get into all of that. So chapter 25. So and it's very quick for Elzar Mann on the Lightning Crash. I mean, they show up, and there's not much resistance at all. They pretty much go in there and take it over. He's flying his Vector for the first time in a very long time, which was kind of exciting to see. He's got like 7 more Jedi on them, but basically they come in there and take out Lightning Crash. And as soon as that goes down, that takes down the Stormwall. Now, they say a couple of times, both from the Republic side, and Gira says it, Marchion Ro says it, but it's only a matter of time before Marchion Ro finds a way to kind of bring up some backup power. So they don't expect this thing to be down very long, but it is enough time to at least do some damage and get all their ships through, right? And let people out.
Yeah, and they have a bad feeling about it when it's just so easy to take it down that they're just like, I mean, they already went into it with the expectation that Marchion Ro would come up with something else, but the fact that it was so easy, it made them even more nervous than they already were.
Yeah. And part of it, I think, is he doesn't care, like you said. Like, he's already moved on past it. Like, yeah, Stormwall, whatever. I've got the light now, so, that's part of it. I did wonder, too, like, if Vice was behind some of this. Like, had she done something to, give Marchion Ro and the Stormwall the middle finger of sorts, but I don't know. That's just my own kind of head there.
I mean, I wouldn't be shocked because Marchion Ro is getting sick and tired of her, and he makes that clear.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Chapter 26. So this is where Vice is basically Vice is holding care still on Naboo. She wants, this is where she tells him that she wants Avar and Porter Engle to show up. This is where she says, I don't care if the Stormwall comes down. I hate it. And then suddenly, out of, Avar and the RDC and the Jedi pop into space outside of Naboo. And so she's like excited because, look, I told you they're finally here. And then sure enough, Porter Engle shows up in the doorway right at that moment. They go into start fighting. Yeah, coincidentally. Like, he was just waiting for that. I don't know. They didn't really explain exactly what was going on behind that. But so this really kind of starts everything in motion. So you've got the lightning crashes down. You've got Avar and everybody jumping into Naboo space now, and Porter Engle's already on the ground. And she takes Carr, I think, at one point as kind of like a prisoner, and he gets away, and they go at it, and so they start their fighting. Well, before we get into the main battle here on Naboo, Lena is talking to Avon on Coruscant just briefly. And Avon basically tells her, look, I'm only helping you because I don't want my mother to find me. Like, I think she's doing it, but it does feel, I don't know if it feels altruistic or not, but she's making it very clear that she's only there because, she's trying to hide from her mom. And this is probably the safest place to be. By the way, she's changed her name also for anybody that cares. She's no longer Avon's Staros. She's Avon Sunvale is the name that she's been using to kind of hide her identity, which I would just change both of the names, That's
Yeah. Well, I also feel like, I don't know, she says she's just doing it to hide from her mom, but she sure is putting in a lot of work to just be hiding from her mom. So I don't know. I feel like she does still care. She just might have a little bit of a tough exterior about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we know she hated that life, right? Like, always feeling like her life was like somebody was going to kill her just to kind of get a one up or whatever. But it's, she wants no part of it very clearly. So I don't think that's going to change unless Gira comes around. So, all right, the Battle of Naboo. So the Jedi it's interesting that the Jedi are acting as guardians of the peace. Like, they're not the first ships in, and they're not the first ships that are attacking the Nihil, right? They are just backing up the RDC and allowing the RDC to kind of do what they need to do. While that's going on, there's a big battle in space, and Avar and all of them are flying up there. Porter and Vice are doing their battle. They're kind of, down on the ground, and they're beating the hell out of each other all over Naboo, really, at the beginning. And he's about to slam her with the Force. Like, at one point he uses the Force and pushes her up against the wall. I do love that she's able to stay with Porter, because we all know how freaking amazing Porter. He is the blade, right? The blade of Bordata. He is like unequivocally the strongest lightsaber or most adept lightsaber wielder right now, and yet Vice for years has been able to stay, keep up with him and stay toe to toe with him. And this goes on here, but at one point he does get a force push on her, and he's about to use the force again to push her up against a railing or a wall, and suddenly the force is gone. And my heart dropped when I was like, oh my God, and it's because, they got reports that the Nameless were probably on Naboo, and Avar even tells everybody as much. Hey, when we get there, when we get to the ground, please be careful. The RDC are there to back them up, right? They've got their guns in case, because they know that it's going to disable the Jedi. But Porter, as powerful as he is, suddenly loses contact with the Force. And I love this because Vice was pissed. Like, she was so mad that this is not how she wanted to kill Porter Engle, right? She wanted it to be a noble fight, as they've done for so many years. I think at one point she even yells at him, like, get your act together, because I'm going to cut you, and I'm going to kill you, and neither one of us is going to be happy about this, because this is not how it was supposed to go.
She wants to, the way I took this is she wants to beat him with her own skills. She wants to be better than him.
Right.
And because if she doesn't beat him fair and square, then she can't walk away saying that she's better than him. She won, blah, 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 because you cheated, because the Nameless came. So you don't actually get to claim the victory if you took the easy way out.
Yeah.
Is the way I took it. Yeah.
She's very upset. She orders them to take the Nameless away. Of course he does. And then as soon as the Nameless gets out of the proximity, the power comes back up, right? He's back in force sensitive again. And of course they go on and carry on with their fighting. As that's going on, Bell, Burry, and Vern, they all get word that Vice is down there. And so they land and they go right into that palace. And they literally, that chapter, I forget which one it was. It's one of the chapters here. I'm going to summarize chapter 28. We're going through 28 to 33 now in this whole thing here, by the way. But in one of those chapters, it ends with them where it says they run right in to the Nameless. And that's where this is. So Bell, Burry, Vern, Burry, and all of them really. Bell is freaking out for all the reasons that we would expect. He's already been in close proximity to the Nameless all the way back to the Rising Storm and what happened to Loden Greatstorm. Burryaga, the entire time, like his fear. I love this, that he was suddenly back in the cave, right, feeling alone under the water, under the ocean in Irem, right, all those visuals that we were getting, all the fear that was kind of consuming him as well. Vern was being affected by it. And while this is going on, Karis Senteca shows up, which I thought he had a really great moment. Like, he was kind of a badass in this little moment here. I loved everything that Karis Senteca did. Silent Graph, I'm not a big fan of, but I do love Karis Senteca. I thought he was awesome through all of this. And there was one point where I think both he runs up to Vern and he holds her hand up, and together they have pistols, they have blasters, but he helps her shoot, even though she can't really see, and she's, of course, reeling from all the effects of the Nameless. They end up killing one of the Nameless by shooting together their blasters, and he was holding her arm to keep her arm steady because it was shaking, because she was, under the influence of the Nameless. While that was going on, we get a pretty key and pivotal moment here with Burryaga, because at some point he starts to, and this is my interpretation. You tell me if you took anything away differently, but it did feel like, even though all that was going on, he suddenly started to feel what the Nameless were feeling, right? He could feel the fear. He could feel their hunger. And it was a way, and where all the other Jedi were given into that fear and wanting to run away and were cowering, he gave into it. He kind of leaned into the fear. And because he was able to do that, he was able to almost target, right? Almost kind of be able to see where the Nameless was, and he ends up using his lightsaber. He takes his lightsaber and he ends up chucking it at the Nameless, and it kills it that way. So even though he was impacted by it, the fact that he was able to funnel all of that fear, and in fact, he starts siphoning the fear, because this is going to play out a little bit later, right? This is kind of much later on when we get another Nameless encounter with a lot of the other Jedi we've already talked about. He's able to siphon the fear from what Vern was feeling, what Bell was fearing, and that helped kind of amplify and target this Nameless, which allowed him to throw the lightsaber and kill it. So that's how they take the two Nameless down. How was your did you have a different interpretation of that scene?
I do agree that was a big part of it. I do think there was also, in addition to what you said, an added element of the fact that Buryaga was wanting to defend Bell. Like, it was more about
Mm-hmm.
defending the life of somebody else rather than his own life. I mean, because they at one point, Buryaga keeps noticing that Bell is screaming, Bell is in pain. He keeps thinking about Bell too.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like giving him like the extra strength of like, if I don't do this, like my friend needs me, I have to do this. And I know that, I mean, there have been other instances where Jedi have seen their friends get killed by the Nameless and not been able to intervene. But I feel like what was unique about the situation was what you said of him leaning into the fear, and also the fact that just know a little bit more about the Nameless now. This isn't like the first time they've ever encountered it. So I feel like that probably also helped too. It's not like it was a complete shock that this was happening. So he was
Yeah.
probably able to think a little bit clearly about like, okay, what do I do now? So
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll see another example of this a little bit later. I think what will be more interesting is what future encounters with the Nameless look like. I know we just had Beware of the Nameless, and what was the other one that just came out? I think you've already done a video on it.
The Edge of Balance 3.
No, the two, or maybe I'm getting my wires crossed. I thought we had the two young adult novels come out already as of this recording. Nonetheless, the point is, at some point, we're going to have more Jedi run into...
do you mean Defy the Storm?
Defy the Storm, thank you.
Okay.
But at some point, we're going to have more Jedi run into it. So we'll see if that changes anything with these the encounters here with the Jedi. While all that's going on, also, Xylan says he wants to go to Naboo. He basically talks Elzar and everybody else to take him out there to Naboo. And so they're like, why do you want to go out there? And this is where he says, I want my dog, kind of thing as well. And while that's happening, Avar is still up in space. Suddenly there's three reinforcements that arrive from the Nihil. So 3 more ships show up there. And we get sense that while all that battle's going on, we go back to Buryaga and kind of like the aftermath of what was happening there. And we learned that he felt that he was out of place, right? The Force was out. There was something weird about what was going on with the Nameless, right? And I don't know how much of this plays into the Blight. It's kind of nebulous again, but there's just something about that encounter that's kind of left him feeling different about it. We also learned that Vice is about to get away. And so Buryaga, Vern, and Porter, and she's jumping into, I think it's Kar Santeca's yacht that he came in on. She's using that as an escape ship to get away from them. And all 3 of them end up taking another ship in that same hangar. They use the Force to hurl it with telekinesis at the yacht. The first one time, they do it a second time, and unfortunately, Vice is still able to get away. So she leaves. And then this all ends with this really exciting moment for me, because I love when we get like Jedi using the Force in ways that we haven't seen used before. But Avar Kriss uses the Force to create. She's in her vector, and her odds are like completely stacked up against her, right? Because there's no one else has arrived yet. Elzar Mann and them are on their way, but they haven't gotten there. But almost in desperation, she creates a Force bubble that surrounds her and her ship, and it starts to grow. It centers from her, right? She's tuned into the Force, if you will, and she uses that to shoot up through the neck of the Precipitate Fire, which is Vice's main ship, and just blows up the whole neck portion of the ship itself. She lives, of course, and Elzar is kind of shows up right when that's going on. But it's a very dramatic moment. It's a very climactic moment. And it was a great use of the Force. That I love. And the first thing that came to mind now, having seen the Acolyte, is, Torben created some kind of a Force field that was impenetrable as well. And I just wonder if that was, kind of the same thing that we were seeing there. But whatever it was really neat to know that the Jedi could do something that special, or at least Avar Kriss could do something that special.
Did you think that this was the first time that she ever did this, or is it just the first time that we've ever seen her do this?
That's a good question. That's hard to, I don't know. I kind of took it like it was the first time she had done it. Like, I think it was experimental. Like, I don't even know if I can do this. Maybe she's done it in smaller ways. But the fact that she was able to make that thing grow so big that she was able to send her ship through it was probably the first time she's ever done anything that great. But it was almost out of desperation, out of the love for Elzar, out of the love for everybody, being the selfless Jedi that she is, the incredible Jedi that she is. I wouldn't expect anybody else to kind of be able to pull this off, honestly.
Well, and it's impactful too. If it's the first time that she's done it, then that adds a lot more weight to it because, then you get the sense that it's like, well, hopefully this works and I don't die, but I have to at least
Right.
try it,
Yeah.
which is,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big deal.
Yep. All right. Well, so that's the Battle of Naboo. Just a couple more things here. On Coruscant, Lena calls Gira Star Wars and it's a great little scene here where she's kind of rubbing everything in her face because now the lightning crash is down, the storm wall is down, they've taken back Naboo, and she's basically calling her saying, like, at one point she says, I'm lifting the comm interdiction, and you might want to consider checking in on your so-called strongholds, minister, talking about Naboo.
And she was making her wait.
Yeah,
While
right.
all
this
this
is going on.
battle was going on, she's like, I'm not going to talk to Gira because Gira was waiting
Yeah.
to have this conversation because I'm pretty sure it was pre-planned, if I remember correctly. And Gira's like waiting. And Lena's like, I'm going to wait till all this is over before I talk to her.
I mean, even it sounds petty, but at one point she even acknowledges like, okay, yeah, I'm probably being petty, but I don't care at this point. I hate this biatch,
Yeah, who cares? I think we're past petty at this point when it comes to Gira.
I hate Gira too, so I'm glad she did it. It was a nice little victory for Lena. So, back to Felna 6, which is that planet that Marchion Ro's been at. Again, it's just more experimentation going on here. But he ends up following. So this is the planet where Bell and Buryaga found the Drengir that they were going to burn, which they end up doing after it died. He does find that. But the interesting thing is he finds also, I think it's this one here, where he finds the insect, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. He finds an insect that was infected by the blight, and it flew away and died somewhere further away, and the blight picked up there and took off, right? And so this is where the light bulb goes off in his head, like, okay, I got it. I'm going to use this as a weapon now. So he also learns about the storm wall coming down and the gaze. We learned that the gaze electric is now powered back up. So the storm wall has come back up temporarily, anyways. But again, he's not very concerned about all that, really, right? He knows that the array on Hetzal that we were talking about at the very beginning, that'll pick up at some point. But I'm back on Naboo. This is chapter 36, and I know I've got a lot to talk about here, so hopefully we can just stick around for a few more minutes. But chapter 36. We have this, Porter goes to Avar, and this is where we talked about earlier on, where he tells her like, hey, I saw your message. It's what inspired me. He gives everybody soup, and he's like, I got to go. I need to go find Vice. And she knows like, hey, this sounds like revenge. I think she even calls it revenge, which is interesting for a Jedi, of course. But she's not going to get in the way of Porter Engle, right? She knows this fight has been going on for years and years and years, and so she doesn't try to get into all of that with him. And then, while that's going on, you got Bell and Buryaga. They've reunited and things are going well. Avar looks over and she sees Zylan Graf and Kar Santeca together and things are going well. And then finally Elzar walks in. And the minute she walks in, she like runs up and kisses him like on the lips, like full on, full throated, full tongue. I don't know, whatever. She kisses him. And he's like gobsmacked, like he's completely shocked that she would do this, right? Of course.
And there's a lot of people in there too.
I know, it's like in front of everybody, like no one says a thing about it. I guess I've got a couple quotes here that I want to just read because they get into start talking about their feelings, really, right? And it's more Avar than anybody else. Like she comes on pretty strong, and more than I was expecting, honestly. But this is all the stuff that's kind of been building up. And I always want to quote something real quick here. So this is Elzar and her. They get away. They start talking to him kind of about their feelings and how they each is feeling. But Elzar says, I'm working for balance, but it's messy. I push sometimes in dangerous directions, but it's all I know how to do. It's what I'm good at. It's taken me to dark places, Avar, as you know. I think I'm getting closer to understanding why. That dark comes with the light. What keeps me driving towards the light keeps the shadows right there too. He says, I need my feelings, hope, compassion, even if they keep me on the edge. The edge is where I do my best work. So that to me, when I hear that, feels like he is kind of a Jedi that is more in balance. Like he's not too far to the right. He's certainly not on the dark side. He's almost, I hate to say, I don't know if it's like a Qui-Gon Jinn or so, because I don't think Qui-Gon would do some of the things, but he does feel like one of these Jedi that is more balanced in their actions. And I don't know if that's any safer, because it does, like, to his own credit and his own words, he could still go and do something evil, but he's able to kind of balance it with the light. Like, nothing's really happened to him, even with some of the more horrific things that he's done already. He feels and understands that where he accelerates is in the middle ground. It's not too far to the right. It's not too far to the left, or not too far dark, or too far light. But what do you think?
Yeah, so okay, I agree with what he is saying, because I do think that even Jedi that are way over in the light, I do still think that, everybody has a dark side. I mean, we see Yoda in the Clone Wars have to face his own shadow dark side. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I do think that even if you're super in the light, that is still there. And I think if you're not aware of it, then that can be even worse. That's when it can be really dangerous. But so I do agree with like the philosophy behind what he is saying. My thing is that I don't know if he is there yet, because I mean, just recently he seems like he was really having a hard time integrating his dark side and really being at peace with it and not being tempted by it. Like, if he's talking about like I've done horrible things, and if things don't go my way, I could give into the rage again. To me, that doesn't sound like you've got it all figured out and worked out with your dark side.
Yeah.
So I do think that like he's on the right track with the way that he's looking at it, but I don't know if he's ready to really fully live that out, because I'm still expecting that if something goes wrong, that he could just go right back into the rage again.
Yeah, and this segues into Avar's response to that, because Avar puts herself in the middle of this, right? This is when you asked her earlier, like, why is she okay with it? I think it's this line right here. So her response to that is, she tells Elzar, "You thrive when you can push and drag us with you to new places. You find the light in those edges. Your problem has been pushing without the right anchor." Who's the right anchor? In Avar's mind, it's her. She says, "You're pushing without the right anchor, which without something that keeps you focused in the light. So when you fall over the edge, it's to the light that you leap first. And when you asked me to be your anchor, I wasn't ready." Right. So she's referring back to when before she left. And then Elzar says, "You bring people together through the Force, through your charm and power, and then you forget yourself. It's the opposite of me, maybe." And then she responds back, reciprocates again, reinforces his feelings. She says, "That makes us a good balance for each other," Avar said, as she wrapped her hands around the back of his neck to tug him closer. Then Avar kissed him again. This time it wasn't sweet and gentle. It was filled with intent. So it's like you said earlier, like it does feel like she is caught up in the emotion. And I think some of the things she's saying are kind of dangerous, because, and it may be true, right? And I'll just say it now, like, I suspect that at some point they're going to do some really great stuff together as a Jedi couple, right? But the minute Avar is gone, let's just say she's impacted by the blight, or let's say, Marchion Ro is able to publicly execute her or releases a nameless on her, and she's gone, that guy is going to lose it, because
Right.
his anchor is gone. He's going to blame Marchion Ro, blame whatever, the blight, the nameless, whoever. He's going to go just full postal on everything and everyone. And this is where it's all going to backfire on them. Like, everything they've already just talked about and everything they said no longer makes sense, because he's way too caught up in this. He's way too emotional, and he's too codependent on somebody else, which I think is what's happening here. There's a codependency that's happening. And that's not the same kind of love that we get with like Luke later on. But there are some things a little bit interesting. There are some things that I want to just get it to as well, that do fit into that role. But that codependency doesn't work in Star Wars, and it doesn't work in real life as well.
Yeah, like I really feel like the whole thing about you need an anchor. I mean, he should be finding the anchor within himself, not in
not
another
relying on somebody
person.
else. Yep.
Yeah, because it's like you said, like the second that she is gone and there's no hope of getting her back, I think that was the difference previously when she was on the other side of the storm wall. There was still a hope of getting her back. He still believed that there was a chance, and that is what kept him going. But if she's dead and there's no chance, then there's no telling what is going to become of him. And and this is kind of what I was thinking about earlier when you asked me about how he's kind of thinking about the people on Coruscant being like, y'all don't even care about what's going on and you're going on in your normal life. if he's just starting to feel a lot of like just like almost he almost sounds a little bit like misanthropic, like just kind of feeling hatred towards people, not really thinking about other people's situations, not really thinking through some of his judgments. Like maybe they
Yeah.
do care. Just
Right.
because someone's at the grocery store or whatever doesn't mean they don't care. You know what I mean? So I'm just kind of like, if he's just kind of starting to make assumptions and direct hatred and frustrations at just like the general public, I feel like that could be kind of the dark side too. So I could see like if he's going to go full postal, like you said, I mean, who's that going to be directed at? It could be directed at anybody he has any kind of like incorrect assumption about.
Yep. Yeah, everybody's a victim. Everybody could be a victim at that point.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's where this chapter really like flourishes and shines, in my opinion, because she comes back with saying like, I'm the anchor, blah, blah, blah. And then she like gives him a massive kiss, right? She kisses him and he's again struck like, what the hell's going on here? He like tries to push back. He says, after all that, he says, I don't know how to do this. I mean, he's telling her, stop. The way I'm reading this is like, stop. I can't do this. I'm not ready for it. Even though she's telling him, no, you're fine as long as we're together. He says, I don't know how to do this. I'll be consumed. I won't survive it, Avar. His voice was so sad, so lost. Tell me, she said, holding his face. He goes on to say, I already struggle with so much attachment, with fighting back the grim desperation of the dark side. I struggle with selfishness, with impulses. I want this. I want you. I always have. I don't think I've known you without wanting you, Avar. And then he goes on. This is and then her response is like a red flag. But he goes on to say, I'm trying to do better, to let the force beat a rhythm in me, like you said, flow through me. I'm trying to lean toward the light by accepting that I have this pull to the dark. That is part of me, and I think I'm doing it. Coming to terms with the presence of the darkness, the understanding making me stronger, a better Jedi. I'm worried that giving into this desire will make it harder again. What if something happens to you? I'd already lost it as it is, but if I take more, if we become more, Elzar's eyes drifted shut. He took a sudden shuddering breath. I'm afraid of what I might do. This is why we, the Jedi, avoid attachments. I'm a case study for it. Elzar laughed a little bit. Her response to everything he just said, her response is, I love you. I'm like, oh my God, that's not what you want to say.
Did you just listen to what I just
I know,
said,
that's
lady?
what I'm saying. Like, and I get it from like her perspective. She's so caught up in all this, and it's just emotion, like pure emotion coming out. But she says, I love you, she said, breaking into a smile. And then she goes, I've struggled with it too. Thought it was dangerous, selfish, something to be carved out. That's a common interpretation of what we're being taught. But that's also too easy of an answer. That love is attachment, that it's selfish, possessive. It isn't. I was wrong. Those things are real and dangerous to Jedi, to anyone, but they aren't love. In my worst moments, I've loved you. In my greatest grief and failure, I still loved you, and it didn't turn me down the wrong path. It got me back on my feet. Now, I get that part. I think what she's saying is absolutely true, right? There's a way to bounce back from it. And this is the part that I feel like this is Luke and this is Vader's relationship, right? Love is what kind of brought them back.
Yeah.
And then she says,
And if you're able to let go of the love,
exactly.
I love you, but I let you go, then that's probably, that's not really the same attachment as what they are actually living out in action here.
This is, what you just said is the Anakin part of it, right? And that's the dangerous part of it. But she goes on to say, love backed people, the Force, watched hope spread, and beings all over the galaxy keep fighting. They keep trying. That's love. That's the purest form of light. How can a sliver of it here be wrong between us, right? And then she doubles down. I love you so much, and it's not a hindrance. Attachment, possessiveness, those are hindrances because they limit a Jedi's potential. That sounds like the freaking dark side. Like,
yeah, you're
you know what
so
I mean?
right.
Like,
I didn't even put that together, but you're right.
That's the passion of it all, right? When you think about the Sith code, that's the passion they're talking about right there. They make the galaxy smaller, but love is limitless, Elzar. Just like the Force itself is limitless, there's no end to it. If there was an end to the Force, to love, to hope, don't you think we'd have found it in the last few years? But we're black holes for love, unending notes and bottomless seas. She's personalizing it, right? She's the unending notes. He's the bottomless sea. We make the galaxy bigger with love, with the Force bursting inside of us. She says, I love you. Third time she said it now. It's part of me forever. The way the Force and light are part of me forever. Nothing, not distance or grief or death, could end it. With a helpless, smiling shrug, Avar added, that's all I needed to say. And what is Elzar's response? he turns and runs away. Like he literally is like, and then he has no idea what to do with all of this, right? He's just completely mind blown, a lot to process, a lot to take in, hearing her say all these things, saying I love you 3 times, kissing him twice with full intent. He's completely shell shocked and runs away, or not, doesn't run away, but he turns away and leaves. And she's like, okay, he left, but he'll be back because he loves me. And in her mind, we were meant to be together. So nothing's going to tear us apart.
Not
This
taking no
sounds
for
terrible.
an answer. Yeah.
I love it from a romantic perspective. I think it's really sweet, and it's the
drama of it. Yeah.
the drama of it all. But like, this just sounds dangerous to me.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know there's a lot there to read, but
The angst is definitely there. That's for sure. But yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said. Like, I think that it's not sounding good. I mean, when Elzar is telling her all this stuff of like his concerns and the reason he feels like he shouldn't do this, I felt like that was like his gut talking to him. Like deep down, he knows that he is not ready. And I'm not
Exactly.
saying that like, I agree with the whole like no relationships, whatever. But like he is not ready. I don't think he can handle it. Maybe there are some people who could, but I don't think that he's one of them. So
yeah.
I fully expect that it's probably not going to be great. And I do have, I don't know, like some of what she's saying, it's not tracking with what their actions are too. Like some of what she's saying sounds like, yeah, that sounds okay, but she's not living that out. Like she's living attachment. The fact that all they think about and all of their actions are motivated by how they feel about each other, to me, that is attachment. And
Yeah, I think so
it's,
too.
and also like what she's talking about, how like it's all love, the force is love, blah, blah, blah. It's more of like a cosmic love and compassion for all that I think that she should really be focusing that towards, but instead she's focusing it towards one imperfect person that you don't know what they're going to do. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's getting something that sounds good in theory, like, a compassion for all people, like what the Jedi kind of set out to do. I feel like it's getting a little bit distorted when she's kind of transferring all of that onto one person.
And I think, not to get too like realistic here, but we think about the Jedi, right? They're told to suppress their feelings, and we know that the 3 of them did have opportunities, and they're more lenient here during this time. But you think about somebody who just kind of in real life who doesn't go through like romantic relationships, in their teens and in their 20s and even into their 30s. And suddenly they're stuck with one person, or they attach themselves to one person, and there's a codependency, and then they break away and they go try to go find somebody else, or they end up finding somebody else. This is kind of what happens, right? They never go through those developmental stages, and so everything becomes suddenly at their age, both in Star Wars and in real life, everything is very romantic love, right? There's nothing really deep there. It's all romantic love. It's very fatalistic and very dramatic, and as long as we have together each other kind of thing, right? That's just kind of what happens, and that's probably what's happening here. They have never really been in a relationship, and so they're acting almost like teenagers, and they're talking almost like teenagers. I mean, this sounds like a freaking Taylor Swift song, right? In terms of like the things that they're saying to each other. I don't know. It just doesn't feel like this is it. It's very sweet. Don't get me wrong. And I do appreciate it. And I love the fact that this is in Star Wars and that we get to see it and we're reading about it. But I don't think it's going to end well. And I actually do like that, because I kind of want that drama, and I want it to crash, because I do want to see it play into the prequel trilogy, like we've talked about so many times. But we'll talk more about this in our second video as well. I just kind of want to wrap this up here because I know we're over on time. But the last chapter we're going to talk about is chapter 37. And this one was kind of cool because this is Markion Row now. He's back on the Gaze Electric. He knows that the storm wall has come down. He knows that they have the path, what was it? The Marius and Tekka's path. I forget the name of it. The home path, right?
The home
and that's
key.
what they use
Yeah.
to kind of break the storm wall down. But he has a number of paths that are tattooed on his body that were given to him when he was a child. His dad was kind of holding him down while he's being tortured, and they were taking these paths of Marius and Tekka and placing them on his body. And he goes through and he finds the path. He finds what he calls the oldest path, which I think is kind of like the first path maybe. And he ends up using that now as the new key for the storm wall. And as he's doing that, he's scraping it off his chest, basically, so no one can find it. So even though Silent Graph was able to, he knew what the home path was, and they were able to decipher all that, nobody is going to be able to take down the Stormwall now, because I think he ends it, like, I think he even says it, unless they find his dead body, there's no way they're going to crack the code on the Stormwall at this point. So pretty sinister and pretty cool. That is, I mean, I didn't really, know much. I didn't know that was even part of what was on his body. We'd seen scars and all kinds of stuff, but the fact that they were tattoos and made with paths would be kind of cool. One at first he says, except for Nestra. I don't know. We'll see. It feels very definitive, at least in this book, that no one's going to break through the Stormwall. But if anybody's going to do it, yeah, my money's on Vernestra or maybe even Avar Kriss, and through the use of the Force. But anyways, any thoughts around that, and then kind of any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Yeah, well, it sounded like too, like, so it's, I guess, just to kind of emphasize, they tattooed this on him, I think when he was a child, or at least youngish, and it's a big secret that nobody even knows. So I don't think, it's like you said, unless they find his dead body, literally, I don't think a soul knows about this, because Mari Sentek is dead. So maybe if Vernestra actually is communing with her, then maybe there's a way to get the information that way. But I mean, that is such like I don't know. I feel like that's such a narrow possibility that I don't know if Mari would even talk about it. But yeah, I mean, it's like big secret, has to be his dead body. I mean, I think that at some point someone's gonna have to figure out something, but I mean, it does feel very hopeless.
Yeah.
When he is thinking to himself that that's the only way that they could ever get it.
Well, we know Mari and Vern did talk, right? And I think she did give her a gift, which I don't remember if they ever explained what that gift is. Or maybe that is. Maybe she did. I mean, one up saying it right here in the chat too. He says, is the key the same one that Vern got from Mari? It could be. Like,
I mean, yeah,
he might think no one else is going to have it, but he doesn't know that Mari and Vern spoke.
Because she communes with Mari in the hyperspace visions, right?
Yes.
So that was kind of like where I'm like, okay, that's the possibility, but I don't know. What if Mari's the one that had it tattooed on his body, though? What would make Mari be like, you know what, I should tell her? That was kind of what was throwing me off.
Yeah, I mean, part of it could just be the fact that she was freaking tortured and held by her own, against her will, for so many years. I mean, they basically just kept her body alive so they could use the paths for so long that she was probably like, screw you, I'll put this kind of, backup plan in place in case, anybody wants to use it. This guy, here it is, kind of thing. I would imagine that's where it's coming from, but yeah, I mean, outside of that, I don't know why she would give it to him.
Unless, maybe she's had a change of heart. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, she was never, I mean, she was working with the Santeca, or Mari was working with them at first, but then they just took advantage of her. And again, they kept her body alive for that reason only. So it was kind of creepy,
Yeah.
But I would suspect that she was well aware of that, even though she wasn't in the right mind and she was so kind of crazy, I guess, at that point. But, yeah.
It's hard to say, because it's the information that we get about that event. It's just from Markion's perspective, and it's like a brief flashback. So there could be like other context that hasn't been revealed to us yet that could explain that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know we went a little bit over. Sorry. But it was good discussion. The book really picks up from here. I mean, the second part of the book here, the rest of the chapters just kind of go. So we'll blitz through that in the second episode. But again, enjoyed all of this. I enjoyed the way this ended. I really enjoyed the Battle of Naboo. That was some exciting stuff to see, especially culminating in Avar's kind of, force use there at the very end. And then this, with the way this ends, this is kind of like the first of two mic drops from Markion Rose saying, all right, I'll just change it on you guys, and good luck, because you're not going to be able to fix it after. I don't care who you have. I don't care if it's Hope. I think he even says, I don't care if it's Hope, Xylan Graph, or whatever, the Force or luck. It's not going to happen anymore. But okay, before we go, do you want to give some shout outs to the folks that joined us for the live stream? By the way, thank you guys so much for joining on the live stream and for all the comments. It's been really fun to kind of interact with you all.
Yeah, thanks y'all for joining us. Tonight we had Skywalker's Academy, Music Train, Christopher Gray, excuse me, Noah Rogers, One Up for CPU, and Alex. So thanks y'all for coming out.
Yep. And don't forget, we'll pick this up. Part 2 will be coming September 17th. That's going to be a Tuesday. We'll wrap up the rest of the book and have discussions, and we'll talk about maybe things that we hope to see in the Trials of the Jedi, which is coming from Charles Soule, which is the next adult novel sometime in the spring. Sounds very ominous and gloomy and dark and exciting. So I can't wait to get our hands on that one. But and then also, just to recap, this Thursday we will be breaking down Charles Soule, Star Wars number 50. So Jonesy and I will be here to break that 50-page comic down, which ends Charles Soule's run on Star Wars comic and the main flagship comic, which has been a great run, lots of great stories, and all the stuff that he's done, honestly, outside of that as well, is all culminating in that comic. That'll be really fun to kind of break down. So, all right, we'll leave it there. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you guys here very soon.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.